People always ask if you're a sweets person or a savory person, and I think some people genuinely are one or the other, but I can't possibly choose. I need balance. So if you're like me and you can't go out to brunch without feeling like it's Sophie's choice deciding between the frittata and the French toast, this episode is for you. So my journey with pears started last year when my boss sent me a box of pears for Christmas. And I figured I'm certainly not the only person to get a box of pears from their boss, so I thought it would make a good December episode. Something that I learned though is that 80 to 90% of the pears that grow in the United States grow in the Pacific Northwest. So it isn't very locavore of me to cook with them at all. I also learned that not all pears are created equal when it comes to cooking. For my 3 recipes this month, I needed a pear that was going to hold its shape. And the Bartlett pear, and ironically for me, the Comice pear, which is the kind that come in fancy gift baskets, tend to disintegrate when they meet with heat. So today I am working with Anjous pears, which I was lucky enough to find locally sourced at my farmer's market. They come in red and green. How festive. And I would describe them as being medium firm and medium sweet, which is perfect for this episode, which is all about balance. So the first recipe that I'm going to demo for you is a simple and elegant tart, and it's equally sweet and savory. And I honestly can't decide whether or not I like it best as an appetizer, a dessert course, a brunch item, or an afternoon snack. So it's probably a good one to keep in your back pocket. So first let's get started on our poaching liquid, which is going to be 3 cups of water, 1 cup of white wine, 1 cup of sugar, about 2 tablespoons of honey, and half a lemon. Although this is a really big lemon, so I'm just going to use 1/4 of it. And I'm going to bring that to a boil and make sure the sugar completely dissolves. So while that's boiling, I'll prep my pears. They're going to need to be peeled and then cut in half. And then I'm going to scoop out the core. And if you have a melon baller, that would be the best tool to use here, but I just have a little round measuring spoon, which also works. Oh, they're a little slippery. Then I'm gonna cut out the base and the stem by making a little triangular cut with my paring knife at the top and the bottom. So then I'll add the pears to the poaching liquid, and I'll turn the heat down to whatever level will keep it at a nice steady simmer. We don't want it to boil off. And arrange the pears so they stay completely submerged. If they're really not cooperating, David Leibowitz suggests cutting out a circle of parchment paper and putting it on top. Poaching is a classic preparation for pears, and you can get really creative with it. There's lots of room for customization. You can use red wine, you can use other booze, you can use fruit juice, you can even change the ratio of liquid to sugar if you want them sweeter. You can add spices. Go nuts. And those are going to hang out in there for about 30 minutes or until a paring knife through the thickest part of the pear meets little to no resistance. Frozen puff pastry is one of my favorite shortcut ingredients because one thing I really love doing is not making puff pastry. So while my pears are poaching, I'll leave my pastry sheet at room temperature for about 10 to 15 minutes until it's thawed. Then I'll roll it out slightly. I really just want to get the creases out and flatten it into a rectangle that just fits my half sheet pan. So about 10 by 14 inches. Now I'm going to take a fork and do what's called docking. I don't want the middle to puff up too much, just the outside crust. So first I'll designate that outside crust. And now that my crust has been designated, I'll brush it with egg to make it shiny. And then I'll dock all over the inside. Now we'll add our layer of Brie. I have a wheel of triple cream Brie that I've sliced thinly, and I'm just gonna cover the pastry with the cheese slices. If you want to remove the rind, you can, but you don't have to. I like a little rind, but I did trim off the pieces that had just a little too much. And on top of that, I'm going to arrange my newly poached pears, which I've obviously sliced. You can arrange the pears however you like, but I think one pretty way is to do 3 rows and sort of alternate the direction the pear is facing. And when you're done, if you have some of the little end pieces left over, just find little openings for them to go in. And that's going to go into a 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes until the edges are puffed up and lightly browned. All that needs to finish it off is a drizzle of honey and a sprinkling of fresh thyme. You know, I'm always looking for that perfect balance of sweet and savory because I think that's what makes something moreish. That's what makes you unable to stop eating it. You cut this into triangles, serve it at your Christmas party, people are going to be obsessed. I used to work at a really nice Italian restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, and every truffle season, the chef would create a tasting menu full of truffle specials. And one year, he came up with this truffle and pear risotto. And I was like, what? And he told me that truffle and pear is a classic combination. It's like tomato and basil. Now, I have scoured the internet and Italian cookbooks, and I have never found anything like this risotto that he made. So I decided to try and recreate it. I did not, however, spend $400 on 2 ounces of truffles. That's just not my reality. So instead I'm gonna use these little baby creminis and truffle infused oil, which is enough of a holiday splurge for my pantry. So risotto has a reputation for being difficult and temperamental and not at all suited for home cooks. And I strongly disagree. I think it's just a glorified one-pot meal. And as far as technique goes, it's not hard, it's just hands-on. So I've got everything I need right here at the stove. On this burner, I've got 3 cups of vegetable stock simmering. You can use chicken, whatever you've got. And I'm going to start my risotto by sweating the onion and mushrooms in butter over medium heat until they're tender and fragrant, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Then I'll add my arborio rice and toss to coat each grain in the butter, and I'll let it toast for a minute or 2. Then I'll deglaze with 1/3 cup of white wine and let that cook for about 2 minutes. Once you start to see that most of that moisture has absorbed, start adding your stock. I'll start with just a ladleful, and I'll continue to stir and simmer until all that liquid is absorbed. Then I'll add another ladleful and repeat. And keep repeating until the mixture is thick and creamy and the rice is cooked through but still al dente. The whole process should take about 30 to 35 minutes. When it's ready, I'll turn off the heat, add my diced pear, and a generous drizzle of truffle oil. I'm going to cover this and put it aside for a few minutes while I make a little truffle pear garnish to go on the top. I'm just going to melt 1 teaspoon or so of butter in this little skillet and add some pear slices and saute them for just a few minutes until they soften. Then I'll drizzle them with a teeny bit of truffle oil. And now we're ready to plate. It's really all about the aroma with truffles. Ugh, and this smells amazing. So I'll top it with my little pear garnish. My tongs was too strong for that pear. I'll just use my fingers. And I'll finish it with some Parmesan cheese. And maybe a little black pepper. This looks and smells pretty good for a budget-friendly truffle risotto. Truffle and pear, you guys. Would you have thought? But that earthy richness from the truffle and those pops of sweetness and acidity from the pears, not to mention this texture story we've got going on with the rice that's creamy but al dente in the middle and the mushrooms. It's really something special. I can't remember where I got the idea to put olives and pears together. I think I saw a salad on Epicurious or something. But the briny saltiness of the olives plus the delicate, subtle sweetness of the pear just made perfect sense in my head. And so that idea is what led to this recipe. Now this is a real wild card, you guys. It's a little bit out of the box and I honestly didn't know if it was gonna work, but I am so happy with the result, so I'm really excited to share it with you. So I'm starting with a pork tenderloin. This one is about a pound and change, which is good for 2 people. But this cut of meat doesn't really come much bigger than this, so if you're having guests, just get more of them. You can double or triple the rest of the recipe. And I'm gonna butterfly this lengthwise. And that just means I'm gonna cut it in half through the middle until I can open it like a book. Then I'll cover it with plastic wrap and pound it flat. And if you have an actual meat tenderizer, you can use that, but any heavy wooden utensil will do. In my skillet, I've got a tablespoon of olive oil, a clove of garlic, and about a teaspoon of finely chopped herbs. I've got rosemary, parsley, and thyme here. I'm gonna sizzle that until it's fragrant, but before my garlic burns, I'm gonna add my breadcrumbs, about 1/3 cup, some salt and pepper, and toast them until they're lightly browned. Then I'll add my pears and my olives, which I've roughly chopped. You don't have to be too precious about the dice because this is all going to go into the food processor anyway, but I wanted to give the olives and pears a little time in the skillet so the flavors could gel and mellow, and to give the pear a little time to caramelize and soften. Also, I'm going to make my gravy in this skillet, so every opportunity I have to add flavor, I'm going to take. Then the whole mixture gets transferred to the food processor, and it just gets a couple of quick pulses until it resembles a coarse paste, kind of like a tapenade. Then I'm going to spread it all over my pork and roll it up. You can hold it together with twine or with toothpicks. If you use toothpicks, just remember how many you use so you don't forget to take any out. Now back at my skillet, I'm adding another tablespoon of oil, and I'm gonna let that get really hot over medium-high heat before I sear the pork on both sides. Seam side down first to seal it. Then it gets transferred to a sheet pan and into a 400-degree oven until the pork reaches an internal temperature of 160 degrees. And we're right back to the skillet. Now, all these well done brown bits at the bottom of the pan, this is what's called the fond. And this is what's going to flavor the gravy. So I'm going to turn the heat to medium, and I'm going to add a tablespoon each of butter and flour and whisk that together to make a roux. I'll cook that for 1 to 2 minutes to toast the flour and get rid of that raw flour taste. Then I'll whisk in a cup of stock, chicken or veggie, whatever you've got. I've got water in a bouillon cube. And this is when you want to make sure all that fond gets scraped up. My silicone whisk probably isn't going to cut it, so I'll grab a wooden spoon. That's thickening nicely. Now I'm going to add a splash of apple cider vinegar, and that's going to add some welcome acidity and pull out the tartness in the pear. When the pork's done, you want to let it sit for 5 minutes before slicing it into medallions. Now I'm using a serrated knife because I want to ensure I don't pull too hard on the pork, that I crush all the stuffing inside. And don't forget to remove your toothpicks. Oh, that looks beautiful. This whole episode, I've been searching for the holy grail of sweet and savory. And this is, no mistake, a savory dish. But it's like that little pop of sweetness makes it even more savory. It's crazy. There's a lot going on here, but it really, really works. And there you have it, 3 ways to win with pears. As always, you can find all of these recipes and more on wingredients.com. Follow me on social media @Wingredients and subscribe if you like what you see. I wish you a joyous and delicious holiday season, and I'll see you next year. Cheers.